Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thanks for joining me. I'm Sean from How to RPG and the Gaming BS RPG podcast. This is Saturday with Sean, where I get online and talk a little bit about tabletop RPGs, what's going on, with help from the chat. So let's go there. Thanks. Looks like Ty might have showed up a little early. I think I had this originally scheduled for 7 by mistake, but local time. Good to see you, Roger. Farty. I think I'm going to try to get this into Discord too as audio. I don't know if this is going to work or not. We'll see. Let's see. All right. And let's see. I think this is working correctly. All right. Sweet. So currently I'm checking out the audio only version on Discord. So Discord now has what's called, what do they call it? It's not the feature. What's the feature called? Can't remember. It's similar to, I think it's their competitor to I'm having a hard time remembering. Let me double check. Hold on a second. And I probably deleted it from my phone. And my memory's going, obviously. But Discord has a kind of live thingamajig. Got delay and echo on the audio here. Oh, on here? On YouTube? Jim? You see. I wonder. Yeah. If you are on YouTube and Discord at the same time, you'll probably get an echo. But Discord has Overcast, not Overcast. What is the crowdsourcing app on iOS? I don't even know what it's not crowdsourcing. Oh, man. Anyways, Discord has live audio where you can bring people in to participate. Thanks, Farty. And I thought, well, maybe we can, before I used to stream Gaming ABS to Discord when Brett and I would do live shows. And it worked okay. And you can still do that. We ended up canning it. I'm not sure why. I think it was just easier to manage one channel. With the new audio feature on Discord, it's basically setting up an audio only room. And what participants can do in Discord is raise their hand if they want to chime in the audio. So whereas before where we would stream and we would mute everybody and they could just listen and that's it, with the Discord component, it's like I think was it Stages? I think maybe it is. I think it's called Stages. You could create stages where we have stage moderator rights, so that if there's a stage moderator, they can actually look at who's in the audience, and if they decide to want to chime in, they can do that. The only caveat to that is I don't have a audio source in OBS to capture from Discord. So what I would anticipate happening is if somebody were listening on Discord, which is great, and they wanted to talk or participate in this format, it's like a call-in show. They would raise their hand and I would say, okay, I'd allow them to talk, and then that would be piped into this channel. But I don't have it set up. Now that I'm thinking about this, there's a couple things I would need to do. So right now, if that were to happen, the YouTube channel would not get the audio from Discord. So I would be just talking to him. Yep. Yeah, no, I agree. And then so nothing would be there. So what I have to do is add an audio source that would capture Discord and my microphone and put it in here, which I could do actually. And I could probably do that right now. And I don't know if this would necessarily be the way to go. But it might be interesting down the road as more of more interactive, a more interactive show. Now I've got Discord in there, and I could turn off this. And I think now what I would do is, now you might get an echo in just a second, but what I will do is add a virtual device. And just bear with me. And so now I think you guys could probably still hear me. And I could capture audio from Discord and it would be ported into here. If I were to do that, I'd also want probably some physical, whether it's a little icon in over here. Awesome. Yeah, so I did it right. Like all these months and times I've dinked around with OBS and YouTube and Twitch and all this other crap, virtual devices. Yeah, the audio is going to be down a little bit. Let me, I could probably even fix that if you give me a second. Let's see. So I have, let's see. So I'm adding a compressor. I'm adding some gain. And I'll add compressor, probably gate, limiter. And what I would need to do is, bear with me just a second. Whoops. So we're dinking around a little technical today. What do we want to talk about? What do we want to talk about? I don't have a lot on the docket. Shocker. There's times and weeks that go by, and I'll see things on Twitter, obviously. Yes, that's a good point, Jim. He says anyone who joins you on Discord will need to remember to mute YouTube, like calling into a radio show. Yeah, that's for sure. So sometimes, every once in a while, I will come across a topic on Twitter. We've gone through this on Saturdays before, and we talk about kind of what's being the subject du jour, but I didn't really have anything this week, and I do have something that's set up that I could potentially do. But I don't know. It's a live, I could do a live play of a game that I have set up. It's an option. I don't know if that's something that people would be interested in seeing. It's a solo play. I'm just getting my settings right here down for this particular input and copying them over. To this new audio input. So I could do that. There's a couple other things that I could certainly oh no, don't tell me I just copied the same crap. Let's see. So I don't know. Excuse me. Morning. Noise gate. Larry, good morning. I'm just dinking around with some settings here. And I'm also streaming to Discord live to see how that works. That could typically be used for a radio call-in show kind of thing. And I think it'll work pretty smoothly. The only trick is probably people muting their mics. Like, hey, you got to mute your mic, buddy. Like when you call into a radio station. I don't know if anybody's interested in participating in such a format, and that's okay, but the option's there. We get pretty good interaction on the chat, which I appreciate. So thanks for doing that. So now you're going to hear some of the audio change. Let's see. All right. And then limiter -1. All right. There you go. So I think the audio might be a little bit better. So I'm kind of looking at, nobody's in Discord now. Jim looked like it was in there one time. 2 Jims. We're in there. So if you recently downloaded the latest episode of Gaming and BS and listened to the audio version, there were a couple of references to Brett and I's conversation before the show. And if you saw it live, you saw some of the argument, and we recapped a little bit of it, and it was probably, and you could see you could get kind of the fuller argument on the YouTube of Gaming and BS for episode 366, because what happens is Brett and I get together, and then we kind of hopefully get on early enough where we got everything situated, and then we say, okay, we're going to go live. Sometimes what happens is a topic of discussion will come about before we go live, and then let me get a squirt gun for my awesome cat, which I don't see is out here. Augie. Nice. Hey Matthew, good to see you. So my cat came down. I gotta go get the mighty stay away from wires and cardboard and chewing on stuff detour. So So some more context around the argument that Brett and I were having this past Monday prior to coming on screen was Brett. So Brett's, we were talking about the podcast and we were talking about new games, and I have a problem. I purged some of my collection, and then all of a sudden, and now I'm buying games again, and my shelf's getting full. So it's, somebody would say, I need help. And Brett kind of says, well, what are you looking for? Why do you have to keep buying new games? And I said, well, I don't know. It's interesting. Sometimes I find it interesting to read games, find how they are done and put together, and different rules that they're incorporating and different mechanics. Huggy, cut it out. Come on. One time I went into a game store and we were talking about, I'm like, yeah, probably never going to play this thing, right? I'm buying the book, and the woman behind the counter, her name's Lori. She's the proprietor of Pegasus Games here in Madison. So if you're local, you know Lori. And she would say, my husband buys a lot of game books with just the intention of reading them. Just like he reads them like novels. Okay, great. I don't know if that's me, regardless. And Brett is at a point where it's like, he I think believes that he's got all the gaming stuff that he wants. Like he doesn't have that, he will pick up new games, but he doesn't have a drive to pick them up to find out what the cool nuances of them are. Like, oh, it's, this is getting popular, or, hey, I've heard good things about it. That to Brett is not something that I don't think it's as high on the priority list for him as it is for me. Sometimes it's FOMO, whatever. What's up, Jason? Yeah, I do for sure need to get a super soaker. As a matter of fact, it's running a little low on water. I gotta get some more in here. He doesn't know it though. Augie, can you please lay down? See, he's like sitting. You see him right out of the couch. Look at him. You can see him right on camera, right here, looking. He looks for stuff to mess up. I'm pointing to Augie on my camera. Look at him. Look at him. Here he comes. He's just, the guy is he's something else. I'm telling you. I think he wants to be part of the show, and I say, no, you can't. And then he just like, okay, well, I'll show you. I'm going to get on there one way or another. So just please lay down, go somewhere, eat. Like I have to go give him food so he stops doing this. Stupid cats. Anyways. So what I went into in talking to Brett about this particular thing is it kind of diverted from that to, well, in today's world, in RPG design, we can look back on the history and all the publications that are out there and all the designers that have come to the table with different things to offer. And that I kind of alluded to, RPG design today is better than it was 20 or 30 years ago. Good morning, Brett Bazinski. Good to see you. What I want to be careful of is because when you say better, worse, then you start getting into opinions, and some would say that's hard to, kind of nail down, because what's better for you is not necessarily better for me, which Brett actually brought up, right? He brought up in the conversation a Maserati. We were talking about cars, and we got car analogy, and he's like, my truck is better for me than a Maserati. Like if you say that my truck isn't better, somebody say, well, Maserati's a better car, a better vehicle. Well, not for hauling, as Brett would say, dead animals. Bad analogy. And it would go, the argument was going all over the place. And, Brett was saying how system mastery, it plays a part in this kind of argument, and it doesn't. Like he wasn't on the same page as me. He's like, system mastery, because if you have system mastery, then it doesn't really matter what game it doesn't matter what you're trying to achieve in the game, because you can do that because you have system mastery. Okay. Hey, Aaron, good to see you. Hey. And what I was trying to convey, just so that it was because when I watched the video, I don't think I was very clear either. What I was trying to say is that if you are trying to evoke a particular feeling, emotion, Augie, please stop. A particular emotion, immersion. So if you were playing a game about cyberpunk or a cyberpunk game and you played a hacker, and through the mechanics of the game, whether you're using dice, a deck of cards, whatever it is, texting, if you were to hack and you were achieving a hack in the game, and a successful hack by, he's going to just be a dink. If you could set up something where you're going back and forth or putting chits in the table, and it felt as though it mimicked or gave you a sense of hacking the Gibson, movie reference, then great. Those things nowadays in 2021, in the modern day, I would say in the last maybe 5 years, can be done, and they are done better than they ever were back in the 80s. Because in the 80s, that stuff wasn't considered. Designers weren't trying to make that happen. I'm really going to... Free cat, anybody? I think he's 26 pounds. Like, he eats a lot, but hey, I'll subsidize some of the food. Now he's laying down. Great. That's temporary. Brett's mentality is that it's system mastery and not the better design. Like, there's no design that's better than another design. Again, getting into better or worse can get into opinion land, and it's relative and subjective, which I wholeheartedly agree with him in what he's saying. And it's not every game. It's not every game. So, for example, if you're trying to pull off a horror game like Dread, and you want to provide a thing that gives you some type of suspense. What's up, Pencil Mage? Attacking a mountain lion, yes. Jesus. And sorry, I distracted myself. Oh my God, I lost my train of thought. Jesus. Oh, so not every game does it. Not every game does it well. But because we've had 30, 40 years of tabletop role-playing games and different people, that's why it's important for diversity. We've had different people come, because diversity is not only the color of your skin or your ethnicity, it's also diversity of thought. Okay? It's something that I think gets lost in the D&I grand scheme of things. It's not to take away from anything like ethnicity and color of skin and things of that nature, or sexual orientation. Thought is also to be lumped into that. Because without, I won't get into that whole ball of wax, but that's kind of the reason why you want different people of ethnicity and different backgrounds and diversity, because they have different trains of thought. They have different backgrounds and experiences that they've come from. Okay, so we get individuals that come into the hobby later than, the 80-year-old grognards that started the hobby. From a war game, mind you. Okay? The origins from a war game. That say, hey, if you're going to have, if you want to provoke a sense of suspense in a role-playing game, here is one way to do it. I'm going to make a game called Dread. And I only bring up Dread because it's like the most obvious, in-your-face thing that it's trying to achieve. And for those of you that I have not played Dread, but for those of you that are like, what's he talking about, Dread? And have not heard of the game, it's a small form factor, independently published RPG, horror-based, and one of the key mechanics is a Jenga tower. Okay? So when it says, tower or whatever, they can't use the word Jenga because they're not authorized, but it's essentially you go out, buy a Jenga tower, and when you're trying to achieve something within the game, God damn this guy. And when you're trying to achieve something in the game, you slide out a brick. And as the game progresses, much like a Jenga tower, it becomes a little less stable, and you risk look at this guy. See him? He's chewing on that. Look at him. All right. If I don't give this guy some food, I'm going to be just completely distracted. So I apologize. I'm going to go get him upstairs to food and get him out of my hair. So bear with me. I apologize. Sorry about that. All right, so game design, fast forward, games can be better designed to evoke specific emotions, whatever. Now, Brett would say, as I catch my breath because I just went up a flight of stairs, Brett would say that could happen, but people would still say, it's a Jenga tower, no big deal. And as a matter of fact, his group would be like, that's dumb. He knows his group so well that they would all say it's dumb. Okay. So that was the argument that took place. And then when I finally got into trying to get him to realize the best analogy that came up, we were talking car to truck, blah, but it's really the truck to truck. So at a truck that's built in the 1930s, is it designed is the one that's built in 2020 better than the one that's in 1930? And Brett would be saying, well, no, not necessarily. It depends on what you're trying to do, which is that's like the worst. Like, what are you talking about? Because they're both trucks. They both haul stuff. They both go down the road. Is it better at going slower? So I think that component is where it was like, now he's just going to throw in the towel and start trolling me. So, anyways, hey, Lucas, if I didn't say hello, thanks for joining. So that component, and I just think that looking at today's games, there are, better layout design, mechanics choices, but not always. Like, there are still games that are OSR based or not OSR based that are just a game. A game is just a game. And they're modeled after past games. There's still a dice mechanic. There's still abilities. How they handle those different things are different. I think with some of those games, for example, if you look at a lot of the fantasy role-playing games, a lot of them are derivatives of D&D in one way, shape, or form. In whatever edition, insert whatever edition. So if you're talking BX, Redbox, BECMI, AD&D, second, first, 3.5, 3.0, 5th edition, 4th edition even. And you look at individuals that are coming out with different fantasy role-playing games, there are times they will look at those and just say, well, that thing doesn't work the way I would want it to work. So I'm going to create a game that streamlines it, makes it quicker, makes it easier to grok the rules, etc. And it's not with like any type of evocative immersion component, right? They're not trying to get people to feel as though they're rangers pulling back a bow and shooting an arrow. Like, it's not to that degree. And that's okay. It's still good design work. The variety and choices out there are just great. Right? Choice is good. Find something you like. Don't play something you don't like. And there's a lot of preferences. But there are things where, like, so Brett, one of his arguments is if you're running out of resources or there's a number, so take Dread and you remove the Jenga tower and just put a numbered box on your character sheet. And as the number goes down and down and down, somebody will feel stressed because that number is going down and down and down. And that may be very well true. I don't think it's the best way to represent tension in a particular game, but it can be done. So I think it's those components and those different games that, and it's hard because, and I would be interested, because of a lot of reasons, but I would be interested to know if you've played games that if you play this game, it feels as though 10 Candles is an interesting one. If you're not familiar with 10 Candles, the premise is you are all going to die. That's it. Like, you're all going to die. I don't know if it's a matter of how or what. It's the story of getting to that component. And as the time goes on, there are certain points in the game where you have 10 candles lit and you extinguish one candle, one by one. And when you extinguish the 10th candle and you're sitting in complete darkness, assuming you're all in one room, dark, only lit by candles, and as each one goes down, well, obviously the light in the room dims until you extinguish the last candle, in which case you're setting in dark and probably signifies death within the game. Those things are, to me, just like somebody sitting around going, you know what? I want to make this game and it's just everybody's going to die. Like, just let's, character death. Yep, it's inevitable. It's going to happen. It's the theme of the game. And as we go there's these things that take place within the game. And I wanted to feel as though the light of life is starting to dim. How do I do that? What would work? I have lights, could dim them down. I don't know. Candles. Well, let's use candles. Okay, forget, how long of the game? I don't know. Do you 5 candles? I mean, the play testing and the thought process of coming up with 10 candles it'd be interesting. And I think with Craig Shipman in Third Floor Wars, bravo to him for having a good interview show. I think he gets at some of those. He tries to understand and kind of pry that information out of some of the developers and saying, hey, what occurred to you, and why do you think this took off, or why did you make these decisions, and what all of a sudden, how did you know that those things were going to be a hit or whatever? What did you trim? And I think if you get into that stuff, that's the argument I was making. That's what I'm trying to look for in some of these games is like, I've got, Temples and Tombs by Christopher Gray, right? So I just got this as a Kickstarter. It's the Year Zero engine, powered by the Year Zero engine, and it's an Indiana Jones game. I mean, if you want to play Pulp and Indiana Jones, this is one of the games that you can play, amongst others. And I was reading it, and there's Year Zero engine is an interesting one by Free League. Just a diversion here. It's interesting by Free League because each game that they put out, whether it be Mutant Year Zero, Forbidden Lands, Alien, this one happens to be licensed. It's not by Free League, obviously. But each one of those games, Twilight 2000, is different. They all use a die six. They all use a die six pool, but the way the die six pool works and the abilities that are tied to it and the skills and talents can be different from one game to the next. Okay. And in some of those, Forbidden Lands, it's resource and the journey based. In Alien, there's some, in Twilight 2000, it's ammunition, some resources and things of that nature. But, and in this game, Temples and Tombs, by Christopher Gray, he, in this game, says you can't die. That's not the point of this game. You don't die in this game. In this game, when you fail, you get catches. And those catches, like, hey, you do this, but there's a catch, right? And those catches then have mechanics assigned to them, right? So maybe you're, hey, blah, blah, blah. Okay, you got a catch. You're captured. So you can't do anything until somebody rescues you. Right. And so that becomes part of the adventure, right? You're Marion, you do something and there's a catch. You find yourself in a tent in, Egypt, and you can't do anything, Marion, until somebody comes and rescues you. And then eventually Indiana Jones stumbles into her tent, rescues her. They get back and forth, some probably opposing roles. She loses. Indiana Jones keeps her tied up. Germans come in, and then she tries to get out of there, right? By getting Belloc drunk. But she gets quickly, fails a couple different roles because she gets him drunk, but then there's a setback, and then the Nazi guy comes in with the burnt hand and prevents her from running out of the tent. You get the gist. So, even within established rule systems, if you tweak it to be thematic, right? In these cases, they are following a specific theme of the game, right? So if you're running Twilight 2000, it's different than, Mutant Year Zero, an apocalyptic world, even though they're both pretty much apocalyptic world. But Mutant Year Zero has got mutants in it. Twilight 2000, World War III is broken out. But again, and when Blade Runner comes out, it could be Mutant Year Zero. I would say there's probably an 85% chance it's Mutant Year Zero, and it's 15% chance going to be some other type of core rule mechanics. But I'm going to bet that in Blade Runner, there's going to be some type of futurist. I don't know if it's going to be relying heavily on the cyberpunk-ish of Blade Runner. Some people say Blade Runner is not even cyberpunk. It's more pulp noir, right? Just in the future, whatever, however you want to define those things, with Deckard talking to himself throughout the whole movie and, etc. But I think there will be components of the Year Zero engine that play thematically into the Blade Runner setting rules, things of that setting rules, more of the setting. Does that make sense? So there's a couple people that came in on that argument with Brett and I kind of at the last minute or it was a reference and they didn't hear the whole thing or, they caught the end of it or whatever. And they said, I agree with Brett, which is fine. But if the problem is with agreeing with Brett is that with the argument he was making wasn't really always aligned with what I was trying to talk about. Like, yeah, system mastery, it's great. I'm not talking about system mastery. I'm talking about the core rules themselves evoking a particular theme, sense of immersion or emotion. So anyways, I just wanted to get that off my chest. Brett's going, hey, it's in jest. We're not pissed off at each other. But it's always going to be a point of contention because I don't think I'm going to be in a place where I can convince him otherwise. I think he's going to die on that mountain, die on that hill because he I think sincerely believes that you take any game framework and you just bolt on whatever the hell you want and there you go. You don't need a new game, which is complete bullshit because part of the things of bolting things on comes from other games sometimes, right? There's inspiration that even comes from those other games. You know, Brett was mentioning how he had put, and this is not fair because he's not here to back up his arguments and clarify and all this other stuff. So full disclaimer, I get it. And frankly, if he's in the chat watching this, which I know he's not, he's probably out in the middle of the fucking woods somewhere. Regardless, you know, it's, you know, he was talking about for Delta Green, they have the bonds in the latest version of Arc Dream Publishing's Delta Green. And the bonds help you retain your sanity in a world that's nihilistic and going to be lost. And so with... He's like, yep, I could do, you know, I used to do that before they made it a formal mechanic. You know, I would have these connections that the player characters could lean on and da-da-da-da-da. Great. That's fantastic. Good. You know, so, yep. And Powered by the Apocalypse, Fail Forward. Yep, Brett's had that in his D&D games as well. Great, fantastic. That's why I created this channel. I can just bash Brett all day and he can't come in here. Right. So, just getting that off my chest and getting people to understand that what Brett was talking about in the context of the argument, whether you agree with him or not. First of all, if you're going to agree with him, understand the premise of which you're agreeing with him, right? Because he's arguing a point really that's not. He was moving, and he was moving the goalposts, like it was just ridiculous. So, and sometimes if Brett just sat back and said, you know, you're right, absolutely, that would be okay. But yeah. Ooh. So my question to you is, I want to know about games like 10 Candles, Dread. You know, we got the Forbidden Lands, the Year Zero engine games that are more thematic based on it, but you know, whatever. Are there games out there that you've played that have specific ways of immersing you in the story and making you feel more part of the game? See, because sometimes I see some games where you're at different. Misdirected Mark kind of had this where you're at like the 100-foot view. Some people say it's like third-person view, first-person view. There are just some games when you play them that you are, here's my character sheet, here are my abilities, you know, here's my weapon, here's my name, here's my hit points, here's my armor class. Sound familiar? And he's, you know, Duergar the dwarf who likes gold and gems, and he's grumpy all the time. And he's a he. And somebody asked me what Duergar is doing, and I say, I'm gonna go in the dungeon. And, you know, do I recognize this? Okay, Duergar does this. And it's kind of, you could, in my perspective, that could be as much as putting a miniature on the table and saying, okay, Duergar goes here, and moving the miniature, and the game master may say, okay, Duergar, give me a check to see how well you do. in whatever you're trying to accomplish. Great, I roll a die. Duergar got a 10. Oh, okay. Well, this is what happens. And it's like up here. And I don't think some of those games for me specifically are going to, they're good games. I like playing them. They're just not going to fulfill it's just not going to get me down into the trenches with Duergar necessarily, right? Because you could play that game and never take on. Some people like role-playing games. So what is a role-playing game? Well, you're assuming a role. Well, okay, how much of an assumption are you taking on that role? There's some people that talk in the funny voice, and they always say things in the first person. They're not referring to their character. They are speaking from their character kind of thing. And so having said that, great games, just different games. And Brett, I think, would agree with that they're all different. But if you've played a game that gets you into, holy shit, it goes back and forth between an NPC and a player character, and there's these things that kind of move back and forth, whether they be chits or whatever it is, and by doing that, you're strategically positioning yourself, and it's through this mechanic that your diplomacy is going to either rise above or sink you. I mean, and you may not even like some of those games, and that's okay. I'm just wondering if you've had experiences with those. Like Alice is Missing is interesting because it's just text based. So I don't know. Some would say, well, is that put out there to become, is that like immersive necessarily? Immersion, yes. So Alice is Missing. The premise is, if you haven't played it, there's pre-generated characters. You assume a role of a teenager in a high school, and Alice is connected to each one of these individuals. One plays her brother, one plays her best friend, one plays her kind of secret love interest, one plays I don't know, a guy from out of town, like guy that moved away and is back on break. And they find out that Alice literally is missing. And then there are cards that are flipped, and there's a timer involved, and there are certain cues during that time where cards get flipped. So as the cards are flipped, there are things that change within the story. So every game of Alice is Missing follows kind of the same flow, but it changes dramatically based on the people you're playing with and how they interact and react to some of the things that are occurring in the story. And it's all text-based, so all you're doing is reading text messages, which can be even more interesting. And in that game, what I find is like you are reading these text messages. It's almost, I wouldn't say it's LARP, but it's really close because the mechanics really start to disappear, because as cards are flipped, you look at like a location and you have to incorporate the location, and it's one individual, and they spur that. They inject that into the story. So if they flip a location, they have to say something that happens at that location or they think is going on at that location. And when that happens, it's coming through the text. So you might not even see the board. You may not even see the card come up. Right? And then the next person injects like another character, another NPC that's tied into the story. Well, what about Mr. Jones? He's the teacher, and Mr. Jones, I think I saw her and Mr. Jones the other day. And then as people talk about this, it kind of becomes either rumor or factual. And you're just reading text. And then there's a tilt in the game, which means that there's kind of a climax and somebody's going to go and find Alice and something happens to them. And then they're texting what's happening to them. And then they don't respond. And everybody's like, what the hell? Where's Sean? Hey, Sean, are you there? Are you there? And you're texting in the group text. And then you're texting individuals back and forth. Like, hey, have you seen Sean? No, I haven't seen Sean. I don't know where. In that game, and how it rides when you get done, you're like, it's a 90-minute in-game experience. It takes about probably 2 hours total to run and play. I mean, you're like, holy shit, man. Like, I feel drained, like, mentally. And you gotta really, like, it's weird where maybe you've been involved with something and you're like, oh, it's time to go to bed, and you can't, right? You're just kind of like, man, I just got done with this thing, and I am not sleepy at all because I got, adrenaline going through. And that's what it feels like with Alice is Missing. You're like, I gotta unwind from that experience. So that's another example of one of those games that does something, I think, unique, because there may be other games that facilitate play through text messaging. I've never played any of them, and I'm not familiar with them. And Alice is good that way. Again, may not be everybody's jam, but it isn't D&D. It's not a fantasy role-playing game. It's something different. And it's, I understand somebody's poo-pooing of some indie games where it's like you're playing a, rock, and you're in a, an aquarium, and your job is to convince the owner to pull you out of the aquarium and put you outside or something. Some of those games to me, I guess, are kind of more out there than I prefer to play. But that's not to say that they may not have mechanics that do something very, very interesting. I'm going to go to the chat because I've been rambling for a while. So Brett Pizzinski says, the rule I made for myself in 2019 was no new games unless I had the intention to play or run them. I've broken the rules several times that past couple of years. Yeah. So he's referring to I purge my games and I buy more. I had a rule at one point where it's like, if I buy a game, I got to get rid of a game. I picked up Gable. I don't know if you're in there, Gabe. I might have popped in. I picked up Against the Dark Master. I picked up the PDF. Then it came across the Noble Knight. Now I have it. Now I guess I got to play it. So Gabe, maybe you can help me out. Aaron, really, I just keep telling myself I'm supporting game publishers, designers, developers, and it's fine if I know I'll never get whatever I'm about to buy to the table. And besides, who knows? It could happen. Jim, I'll pick up a PDF just to read it if the game seems interesting, but if there's not even a possibility that I'll play or run it, it's got to be really interesting. And Brett and I were talking a little bit about some of these mega campaigns like Masks, Murder on the Orient Express, Impossible Landscapes. Like, even insert any of the big D&D books, supplements, adventure supplements. I was going to be like, ooh, what came out? Impossible Landscapes I'd like to run. The Delta Green campaign. Right, Brett, Brett's like, I was going to pick it up, and then I thought, I'm never going to get it to the table, and if I get it to the table, we're never going to get through it. And it's tough, man. Those folks that play, like, I listen to the Lollygaggers, I listened to the Curse of Strahd one, I can't remember who did that. I listened to, like, the Curse of Strahd one, I probably listened to, like, 7 episodes, and those episodes are 2 to 4 hours a piece. And if you get a good actual play, and you define that any way you want, great. But it was I was like, okay, wow, this started last year. I'm on episode 10, and I'm just getting to January of 2021, and they have 20 more, 10 more episodes till I actually catch up. And I get notification from Twitch that they're recording the next one. So like every week I get the notification, like it's just ongoing. So by this year, it's going to be 1 year campaign. They're probably playing on a weekly basis. I mean, they're long, and I don't know. But at the same time, I'm playing Forbidden Lands. I don't even know when we started the first one with the TPK and then restarted. So it hasn't been a year. And I think, with the TPK, you kind of, start from a clean slate anyway. But some of those are just, I really want to do that mega campaign. And then I think to myself, there is no way hey, Sean, you should pick up Murder on the Orient Express. It's really great. What? Like, I've already had masks. How am I going to get through murder on the Orient Express? Jim says, just because you can run any game with D&D mechanics doesn't mean you should. There's a lot implied about the world and the PCs in the system. Yeah. Lucas says, modern games have had time to learn from past games. From the past games, one could make and bolt on ideas to a game, but having a stressed tests system is nice. The older stuff, OSR, encouraged more GM freestyling. Yeah, for sure. And, some of these ideas might have come out of the fantasy role-playing stuff. They, of course, did. It's the grandfather of some of these games. People probably looked at them and said, oh, this could be done differently. It could be done better. Oh, and by the way, I don't necessarily want to do it in the fantasy RPG genre, so I want to do it this way. And it's a great ecosystem in that regard. But to say that, the days of Tunnels and Trolls, Traveler, GURPS, original D&D, AD&D, second edition maybe, and before. And what else was out there that were some of the big ones? Call of Cthulhu. To say that some of those granddaddies did some ingenious ideas of how to kind of do a horror game, a generic game, an adventure role-playing game, they just weren't there. Their brains just weren't there. And that's okay. Can we just admit they weren't there yet? They're prototypes. They evolved over time. They grew. I mean, even going from like first edition AD into second edition, like whether you like them or not, whether they are your jam or not, whether it made sense to you or not, they were different and they morphed into different things. Second edition to 3.0, 3.0 to 4.0, Come on. Meanwhile, GURPS is GURPS. I don't even know the damn differences between first edition and fourth. Jim says, I just listened to the gaming group episode from back in spring. Playing with the same people for 30 years is awesome, but maybe it limits one's perspective a bit too. I have thoughts. We talk about our friend that we both worked with, who we've referenced him in the show. A friend might be strong, but an associate of ours that we know, mutual contact, John. And finding out John was a gamer was kind of interesting for both of us because we never knew. I don't know why that's a big deal, but sometimes you'd be like, oh, I could see this person, playing role-playing games, and then there's times where you're like, what? No way. He was one of the no ways to me anyway. And when I met John, he was playing Pathfinder and he had his home group, and that was it. That's all they did. And they eventually moved to 5th edition, but it took them a long time. And this was like relatively recent. Like 5th edition had been out for 5 years at this point. And then they finally made the move. The DM's like, I'll give this 5th edition a whirl and we'll just transfer the campaign to the 5th edition. Didn't go to conventions, had no interest in playing any other game, blah, 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 blah. And Brett and I, every once in a while, bring him up, and we do it in a way where it's like, that's the hobby to some people, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with it, okay? Just want to put that out there. But you may not, and then, there's Old School DM, who I think went on our forums. As a matter of fact, I know he did, because we did the one, that might have been that episode, actually, that Jim's mentioning, the gaming group episode. We probably mentioned John in that one. We mentioned, I know we talk about, like, we may have in one episode alluded to the fact that when you don't play other games, you don't get exposed to other things, obviously. And I think there's always there is that component when, like with online, there's a lot of 5e players that haven't played any other game but 5th edition. And so some of us who are, I would say, more RPG advocates, maybe, I don't know, that say, hey, you should try this game. You'll really love it. To try to get them into other games that we find interesting and we have a fondness for and appreciation, but they don't want to do that for whatever reasons. And sometimes some of the advocates will get perturbed because then we'll just be like, they complain about 5th edition, but they never want to try anything else. Or, hey, you should try this, but they won't. It's free. Like they say, well, it costs money, but this thing's free, and they still won't do it, right? So there's always this kind of battle back and forth that occurs. And Old School DM mentioned, like, I don't want to play anything else. Like 5th edition D&D is it, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Now, I would be interested to know whether that particular individual takes up 6th edition or 5.5 or whatever it is, the next one that comes out in 2023. Are they going to be the first one that jumps on that bandwagon? Because by their own mentality, they're going to stick with 5th edition. Like, as everything they've kind of touted about, hey, I enjoy 5th edition. It does what I need to. I've got system mastery. I've got a good group that plays it. I don't want to invest in any other game. I've got all the books. I've, financially invested in all these things. And so, great. But what if 5th edition hasn't been around since the dawn of time. So what were you playing before 5th edition, right? So come on now. But, with Old School DM, he said on the forums, like, I don't want to be convinced to play any other game. I don't want to play any other game. This is my jam. End of discussion, blah. Fair. You do you. But I also think that specifically, like with Brett or somebody in the podcasting space, especially if you're doing an agnostic type of role-playing game podcast, I mean, we don't say we're a D&D podcast. We do have a ton of references to D&D, of course. Like, there is some would say you are a D&D podcast. You just don't, you're just in denial, which is a fair statement as well. But going back to not exploring in other games, I worked at a place. I started my job when I was 20 years old, the factory, the local factory, feed mill factory. And that's what I do. You go to work there, you're loyal, and I'm going to retire from there. I've never been out of the United States, and I've never been outside of the state of Wisconsin because I have no need to go anywhere else. I eat, meat and potatoes. That's the food I like. I don't want to try anything else. I always buy insert vehicle brand here. It's been reliable. I haven't had any problems with it my whole life. I buy that. You always buy that brand. Buy American, whatever. That's what you do. If I'm going to get my coffee, if I'm going to make a coffee run, I always go, to Mickey D's and get my cheap coffee, Dunkin', whatever. I get my coffee. It's the best coffee. I don't have any reason to go anywhere else to get a different kind of coffee. I'm not interested in trying anything else. Oh, my daughter's getting married. They're going to have, food at the reception. It's got to be meat and potatoes for me. And I only eat one type of salad dressing. It's my favorite salad dressing. It's the only kind I like. All the other ones are terrible. I don't even want to try that stuff. I'm describing my father. in case you didn't know. My father is a good man, but at the same time, he doesn't. He's never been to Europe, which is fine. A lot of us haven't. It's okay. But what you get out of going to Europe and traveling and understanding other people or trying new things, foods, blah, 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 it's just different experiences and opens your eyes to different things. And I think when we are, it's so funny. The people that are crying about a lot of diversity are might be the ones that are only playing D&D 5th edition. Like, what? Okay, well, hey, so be it. That's cool, but I don't know. So my take on the different role-playing games things is like, if Brett decides like for the rest of his life, 1st edition AD&D or 5th edition is his game of choice until he dies, that's his prerogative, no problem. Now, the only caveat to that is if you're running a role-playing game podcast and you're talking about other games, and then you're like, well, no, that game isn't as good or it doesn't do this thing. Well, then you're just speculating to some degree, or you're reading a white paper on it because you haven't actually played it. Armchair quarterbacks. That's frankly what we are. Like, there's plenty of games that I reference that I haven't played either. So, it's wankery a little bit, right? That's what I say. I think that, I don't know, man. It's not any less fanatical than somebody that only plays just PBTA. Oh, man. Sean and Brett need to swap in real life groups. Oh. I play with multiple groups. Like I've played with a lot of different people. People, it's interesting. People will keep track. Some people will keep track. I saw Blake do this on Twitter, so it's not any secret. He listed 44 different role-playing games that he's played ever. Like, that's his total. Not in the last year, but total. He's played 44 different titles. I would be interested in listing all the different people I've played with. The games I can probably, mine, I don't know if I've hit 40. To me, that great. But I would be interested in all the different people I've played with, because with those you play different games and then you would play with the different people. They will help you with those games. Maybe they have system mastery and you don't, and you're still running the game. And how different game groups gel. With Brett's, he's been playing with them for a long time. He knows and understands them well. It hasn't always been kumbaya. I remember him getting perturbed and not being happy with them because some of the things that were going down. Now it seems to be much, much better, and air has been cleared. And it could stay that way for the rest of their kind of gaming experiences. But, his game group is unique because I'll talk to him about some of those guys. And I've met a majority of them. I haven't played with them. But I know some of the types because Brett talks about them pretty, like he mentions Zave, who is much more of a mechanics person and wanting to kind of win at times, and I know Lenny, I mean, he's an actor. He aside, right? He's kind of he does local theater and stuff like that. So, but Lenny also appreciates Pathfinder because I think we even brought it up on one of the episodes where they have an appreciation of different unique builds. So if you play a fighter, say in BX, one fighter to the next is just another fighter. There's nothing to differentiate them other than their name and their race. Now, I hear some of you say, well, it's how you play them, da-da-da-da-da-da. I mean, you got to make it your own. Understandable. But if you take a fighter in Pathfinder, they will be quite noticeably different because you're going to pick different paths, archetypes, feat trees. You're going to have, whatever. Mechanically, they'll be quite a bit different. And they like some of those choices, even if they're not necessarily power gamers. So, there are a few members of Brett's group that I don't know really well and how they kind of run or kind of flow. But it's for sure. I think it would be very safe to say that Brett is like he's not a lifetime GM for that group, but he's pretty damn close. I know that, Lenny runs a game of his Murder on the Orient Express. I know that Nick is running Star Wars. Like, we bring that up on a lot of episodes. But at the same time, Brett's always usually running a game for those guys. Like, so literally there's 3 games. Like his, Lenny's, Nick's, Star Wars, and then his kids. So when he talks about like, I can't play Delta Green or run a Delta Green game, well, no shit, because he's got freaking 4 he's involved in. Lucas says, I like new RPG ideas. Yes, a peanut butter sandwich is good, but with jelly it can be better. Than I heard of toasting the bread, but I don't know grilling it, but I will try it if it's on my plate. Aaron mentions rules matter. Lucas continues, 10 candles is awesome, but I've ran it a few times. The candles go out is based on failure, and in that moment the player gets to define the world, make rules, and add creep music. Now, there's more to it, and that, but it builds tension, also causes the pool of dice getting smaller and the chance of success lowers. So I appreciate the insight, Lucas. Thanks so much. I have not played 10 Candles, but I know it's quite an experience, and I knew there was more to it than just a candle piece, of course, but somebody came up with that. And for particular reasons, like, a lot of these games go through the ash can process, which was pretty insightful, especially with the indie space. Like, good indie developers, single individuals that are trying to get a game out. I mean, they take it to Gen Con, or they take it to, I can't remember the one game convention that's really specific to game designers, where they do a lot of play testing. Son of a bitch. I think Sean Nittner is very involved with them. But going through that feedback process from players is pretty huge for them. Getting that feedback, they've done it. I've been part of those at Forge Midwest. Somebody's doing a game, and they're like, "All right, this is kind of a beta. I'm interested to get your feedback afterwards. Run the game. All right, here's a sheet. Can you fill in some things? Can you provide some feedback?" They're scribbling things down. They explain why they chose the decisions that they did in the game design. And then from that feedback, they can choose to implement it, or they could choose to not. Sean doesn't know what he's talking about. Throw that out. That's something I never considered. Okay, how would that happen? I've seen Ron Edwards, who's been a big person when the Forge was around, and I've seen Ron provide feedback on games. Like, he does a really good job in framing things up so people can kind of consider. He knows that people aren't going to go, "Oh yeah, that's great. Ron said I should do this, so I'm going to do it." It's a discussion, and then getting to some of these games, the outcome and what we get to experience. We may even have feedback and change it to fit our own needs, which is fine and dandy. But I think the process is some that really vet it. We reap the reward, or we can. All right. Let's see. Wayne says mechanics matter. They may not be the most important thing. RER enjoyment in the hand of a skillful designer can enforce the theme and mood of a game. Gabe says, so Brett would run a D20 system where you don't die. Run out of hit points, you get a setback. Well, he's playing AD&D right now, and he's implementing save or die. I don't know. I don't know if I would want to play that game. I mean, I guess I would. But we mentioned it in Save or Die episode. It does. those things do impact the way you play the game. It does. Star Wars, perfect example. Well, okay. Actually, this one. Temples and Tombs. You're welcome, Christopher Gray. Temples and Tombs. It explicitly says in here, characters do not die in this game. That's not what the game's about. They run into issues that they have to overcome, right? It's an Indiana Jones movie. Indiana Jones gets tied up. Somebody frees him. It could be spirits, like floating around some lost Ark of the Covenant or whatever that frees him at the end. But, he has to get on that truck and fight Nazis and, whatever. And it's, you failed that roll. Now you're under the truck and you're getting dragged behind. Yep, you're not taking damage. You're taking like catches in this game, I believe. The way you would play that game if you knew character death wasn't a possibility, what are you going to do? What do you mean, I can't die? Nope. Oh, shit. That's a whole different story. The risk that you take in a game where you can't die is different. Star Wars, when I tell people, hey, in this game, it's hard to die in Fantasy Flight game Star Wars. You can take damage, you can take critical hits, and you roll on a critical hit table that's like numbered up to 199. People are like, well, how do you roll 199 on a percentile dice? Well, you take the amount of damage you've sustained and then you add that to the percentile. Well, of course, when you hit 199, you die. I think that's like the result. You're dead. But that's pretty rare. You're not going to take 100 points of damage and then roll percentile and roll another 100. So when you play Star Wars and you roll on the critical hit table, guess what? Darth Vader just took off your hand, but you didn't die. You can go and get one attached, get it in the back of the tank and have one put back on and you're good as new. So when you play that game and you're swashbuckling and you're taking your freaking suspension gun and hitting it and swapping it around a pipe and you swing across the chasm that's like endless out into space, that's what you do. Because if you fall, hey, you get another shot at something, you hit it, great, you swing off and you bounce up against the side of the walls. That's a different type of play. You got save or die in a game? Dude, I'm not going in there. You go in there. I'm not going in there. All right, let's keep going then. So I don't know how Brett's players are handling that specific component. Now, I mean, Nick was the hardy paladin and he was like, I'm going to go ahead and tackle this because that's what I do. I'm the paladin, I'm the hero, and I'm going to slay evil's ass. And evil pointed the finger at him and said, save or die. Like one roll, that's it. So hope at 11th level you got a good, insert save type here, right? Poison save, whatever it is. So if players in those games turtle, do you blame them? They turtle up? Well, we got to go and save the queen or whatever the deal is. We got to do this. Great. But you can also then skip a bunch of stuff that the dungeon master puts in front of you because, I don't know, there's a weird risk involved. I don't want to get super instant tetanus. I don't want to save or die. And then when a dungeon master's like, why don't you guys go into this tomb? I don't know. Do we need to? You got to have a pretty damn compelling reason for those player characters to go into that damn thing if they're save or die, especially if somebody's done it. Like, I think what happens is you kind of go along and you go along and you go along some more. Like, I bet you, Nick, when Brett said save or die, I bet you could hear a record scratch in the damn room. What do you mean save or die? Like, if you don't make this, you die. Or save or die. Okay, no problem. And then they roll the die and like, oh, I failed. Oh, you're dead. Oh, no. You said save or die, but I rolled. It's, I failed, but do I really die? Yes, you're freaking dead. I mean, it gets quiet in rooms like that. Especially if you're 11th level or whatever in AD&D, that's a freaking huge amount of experience points if you're playing by the rules and doing by, killed and gold, right? Man, I would be like, son of a bitch. Oh, okay, no big deal. There's grab my body and we'll use resurrect, right? The cleric's like 11th level. The hell, what level is resurrection? Probably got it on the list, right? It's going to take a little while. Okay, no big deal. Oh, house rule, no resurrection. Like, that would be the other, like, I got to ask Brett. Like, okay, you have save or die. Do you allow resurrection? Oh, no, resurrection. That's bullshit. Like, come on now. You got to... Oh, man, right? Role-playing games, wankery, woo! All right. Lucas says, I hope aliens will be part of Blade Runner. Going back to the chat. Going way back. Sorry, guys. Lucas says, I hope Blade Runner can be added to aliens. They say they're connected, apparently. Mention them. I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence. I don't want aliens in my Blade Runner. They weren't in the movie. I don't want them in there. That's just me. You want to throw them in there? Go nuts. Jim says, I love old school D&D for dungeon crawl / wilderness 0 to hero campaigns. I wouldn't use that type of system for sci-fi or cinematic pulp games. Wayne says, system mastery is a feature for more complex games like Pathfinder. If you like system mastery as a feature, then probably don't play Lasers and Feelings. Yeah, so Lasers and Feelings is literally like a 2-page role-playing game. I have not played. I know of it. Rocker Boys and Vending Machines is a game misdirected Mark, and did Engine Publishing do it? Or their publishing arm put that out? Let's see. Thanks, Aaron. You also agree, Aaron says, I agreed with your position, John. I also agree that it seemed like the two of you are not having the same discussion to agree. No, it wasn't. That's what was driving me absolutely bonkers. I'm like, wait a minute, dude. Like, you're arguing something different, and this chat keeps flipping around, and it's driving me nuts. So, yeah, it is. That's what I was really getting frustrated with. Like, dude, you're on a different page than what I'm talking about here and what I'm trying to convey. That's why I felt like I wanted to say it and set the record straight here so everybody understood. Wayne says, skeletons by bully pulpit. You play the cursed defenders of a tomb. You are dead. In the game, you turn off the lights in the room between events when the pesky adventurers come into the tomb. Interesting. You and the other players end up developing your skeleton's history, how they came to be cursed, etc. Oh, it sounds fantastic. Lucas says, in a Cypher horror game, there was a mechanic foe build tension. He probably meant mechanic for building tension. On a 1, the GM gets to alter the story, but in moments of tension, that number can go up. I had a die on that table to show the number. Interesting. Aaron says, the stress mechanic. So naming some of the games that kind of instill or evoke immersion or a type of emotion. Aaron says the stress mechanic in Aliens or that D&D and many others assume character advancement, stats, abilities, equipment, etc., which is not as fundamental in games like COC, Traveler, etc. I would up the number when no one was looking or when I would make solid icon. Oh, Lucas mentioned he's going back to that the Cypher horror game and building tension mechanic. He continues, I would up the number when no one was looking or when I would make solid eye contact. Gabe says, most RPGs keep me awake all night anyway after I'm a GM. My mind kept processing Conan mechanics all night Thursday. It's hilarious. Yeah, for sure. I have to wind down after gaming. Like you're awake and you're in the moment. Like I can't, like my wife's, we get done on Thursday nights. It's like, 11 o'clock local time. My wife's like, I'm going to bed. I'm like, can't sleep right now. I just got done with the game. I got to wind down. Jim says, I'm not always looking for the sort of intense experience that Alice is missing sounds like it provides, but I'm glad that type of game exists. Lucas says, Masks has been fun. They're at session 71? Wow, very close to the end. That's crazy. Orcus Dorcas, good to see you. Lady Blackbird may scratch the itch you are describing. I have never played it, but a good friend whose opinion I completely trust can't stop recommending it. Cinematic and quite the ride, it seems. I did play it. It was with Wayne Peacock. Wayne's in the chat. Wayne ran it for us. It was good. I mean, I only had a taste of it once, but they're all pre-generated characters. Kind of like, hey, it's pulpy. There's airships that are involved. I never knew. I had no idea. Like I've heard about it. I've known about it. I knew somewhat of the premise, but I was way off. Like I for whatever reason, thought it was like a fantasy RPG. And then, and I think it's free too. I think you can go get it for nothing. Rich Rogers from the Gauntlet's a huge like Lady Blackbird fan. So it's a contained boxed experience, I would say. And the way that it works with tying into elements of your character is pretty cool, right? And if you could tie it into traits of your character, well, then you get more dice. The more dice, the more potential for success. So Jim says, I did that kind of inversion with Goblin Squad, but there wasn't anything in the mechanics to provide a lot of immersion, and it was mostly played for laughs. Like all you guys play Goblins. Laramie says, that's always my goal at a convention. I try not to play games I know. If you were at my table, you might think I also run games I don't know. It's the dressing ranch, Matthew says. No, my dad only eats French dressing. And that's true. At my sister's wedding, she had a traditional wedding, decent size party and guests. And, she had to go to the caterers and say, look, here's the deal. We want 2 different dressings. Here they are. And, oh, by the way, my dad needs French. Like, we'll bring our own bottle. Like, that's what it was. Ridiculous. Farty says, I'm playing a whole bunch of different games. I thought I loved 5e. The more I play other games, the more I learn what I'm missing. I'm starting to realize what kind of game I actually enjoy. Yeah, it's almost like you could love 5e. And I think it can be a great game for many people, for sure, absolutely. And they could play that game till at the end of time. But how do you know if you're missing out on anything? Because we'll be these advocates, right? And we'll talk about, it's just, I got to try this one game or whatever. It does this so awesome. And it's just kind of talk, and they, read about it. They see it on posters. There's advertisements on TV, and we just go, yeah, whatever. And then we stick with our meat and potatoes game. Nothing wrong with that, but it's just, hey, you had to be there. You had to be there. You got to be there. You could listen to the rock band on Spotify. If you go to a concert, it's a different vibe. It's a different experience. So when you play it, it's different. Yeah, I could tell you a lot about it, but let me have you at the table once and then have you make your decision. Like, not for you? No big deal. Go on about your merry way. And he also could say, and what games he doesn't enjoy, Farty says. Hobbsy, Jason Hobbs from Hobbs and Friends, formerly of Hobbs and Friends, the OSR. Can't wait to see the payoff on this buildup. He's like, I'm probably like 10 minutes behind in the chat. Jim says, I've got my wheelhouse when it comes to running games, and I like playing that style as well, but I do try to branch out a bit every once in a while. Jason Hobbs says, goodness, no way I could list all the people I've played with. Yeah. Yeah, Hobbs does, well, he plays a lot of drop in, drop out, Wes Marches types games. So he could have 5 different players every week. That's awesome. Gabe says, I'll have to provide context to every comment. I meant instead of playing Temples and Tombs, Brett would run D&D with the hack so described. Yeah. Yeah, I could do that. I've done that. I could just bolt it on. It's a framework. Is it a framework? I thought it was a game. Say freaking agile. Kanban shit. Like framework. What? It's a framework. A web framework. Bootstrap. Framework. Dorigo, good to see you. Gabe, I don't know if I acknowledged you, but good to see you. Victor, morning. Hey, Murder Hobo, good to see you. Yeah, if you can get Rich Rogers to run it for you, do that. It's amazing, he says, of Lady Blackbird, for sure. AWOL, I see you over there. Spook, CJ, Ghost, all in the Discord. Thanks for showing up. So I didn't have a topic. I set the record straight with the discussion and argument that Brett and I were having on the last episode leading up to the beginning of the show. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you could go to YouTube, go to gamingandbs.com/YouTube and look at the episode 366. And at the beginning, we are getting into the argument a little bit and wrap it up right before the music kicks off. But I kept it in there. If you've just listened to an audio show, you're not going to hear it. I edited it out. Whew. So my Delta Green game wrapped up. Larry, thank you. Roger, I don't know if Roger, you showed up today, but Larry did in the chat. VC, good to see you in the Discord. So the Delta Green game, Hourglass. I mentioned a little bit in the last episode. There he is. Good to see you, Roger. I'm still interested to hear some of the feedback from the gang. Dorigo, I have what's called stages installed on Discord. People can actually chime in if they want. If you just have to raise your hand, and then I would bring you on for audio. So the people in Discord are only hearing me; they're not seeing me. But stages is a way where you can come in and you could say, "Hey, I got something to say," and you can raise your hand, and then I could bring you in the audio, kind of like a radio show. I'd probably have to put my headset on. If you do that, you have to mute like your source so we don't get a huge echo from you. Like if you're on YouTube and Discord or vice versa, just like a radio, if you call it a radio show. I just thought I'd try and see what happens. It's just another avenue. Somebody can just chime in and listen to us. Some people can actually pull up Discord and have that just streaming wherever they are. Where YouTube, if they don't have Prime, well, then they have to have their phone open and it drains the battery and all this other crap. So, and frankly, in this show, there's not a ton of visuals necessarily, but it's something that I just got to keep in mind. So, we'll see. Maybe we'll get some BSers or some folks to chime in and have. It can be a little nerve-wracking, right? If somebody wants to kind of come in and say, "Hey, I got something to say," and they know that they're being recorded. So I get it if we don't get a ton of participation, but it's an option. We'll see how it goes. So having said that, Delta Green, Hourglass. I won't mention much about the adventure and scenario itself in case any of you want to play it. I am still interested in everybody's feedback. Larry, Rogers, Eileen, and Ray were all the players. And I think it was like, had a good time. I think there's a consensus, I don't know. I mean, Problem with running Delta Green is if the game goes in a particular direction, it could make somebody's experience a positive one from their perspective, and then there may be ones that, Eric Salzweedel, friend of the show, I ran him through music from a darkened room with Phil, and I don't know if Eric enjoyed it, honestly, and I think and the only reason I say that is because he's like, hey, are all Delta Greens just so nihilistic in nature? Like, is it always... He felt that at the end, the ending was kind of, not an ending. Like, there were loose ends. And is that kind of natural for Delta Green? And the answer is, well, could be, yes, mostly, right? It kind of goes on and on. Whether you accomplish what is in front of you as players or not. If you accomplish the mission in the scenario, well, then fantastic, but Delta Green goes on, right? That's what Brett was saying in episode 366 when I was kind of explaining how the group did things, but maybe not tackle the source of the evil in the scenario specifically. Brett was saying, well, that's just the way it is in Delta Green. And I'm like, I understand that. I'm talking about the scenario itself. Like, you can kind of quote unquote win the scenario. Yes, the next one, it pops up somewhere else, but it's unrelated to some degree, right? Unless you consider like, oh, Yog Sothoth was involved here and then they're involved in this one. So that connects them? No. To me, yeah, maybe, I guess. So I drink water. I drink water as I'm holding up a vanilla Coke. Uh-oh. VC, you got something to say. Here you go. So hold on a second. I think I got to unmute you, my friend.
I think I have to push to talk in order to have
There you are. Me. Interesting. I thought you would have to raise your hand and then you come in. Could you say something quick?
Quack.
Oh, there you go. So everybody should be able to hear VC. You have something to say, VC.
In regards to Delta Green and their endings, it's not always open-ended.
Right. I would say in a majority of the scenarios, they're really not. There's an objective that you can achieve, whether you do it or not, right?
Yes.
So are you running right now, Delta Green?
Right this minute, no. I've got a few of my group of friends who are starting to calm down from the COVID freak out, who are talking about getting back together. So I've been looking to see what would be another good, introductory mission for them to get into. And the ending for that one, without spoiling it, actually it doesn't have a solid, this is good or this is bad. It really has a, what's your opinion?
Huh. So which scenarios have you run?
I have done, I've slowly been working my way through the Night at the Opera book.
Okay. And for those that aren't in the loop on Night at the Opera, what Delta Green and Arc Dream has done is they'll release scenarios typically individually that you could buy, but then as those have been out for a little while, they'll put them and consolidate them all in one book. And so A Night at the Opera has like the PX one. Can't remember that. It has 6 Delta Green missions, and here's the fun part. Because, like you said, they released them individually. When they put them together in the book, they actually gave them a quote-unquote canonical timeline, too. Yeah. And which one? That's Hourglass, right? Or, I mean, Black Sites. Which one is that?
Black Site is in here. There's Reverberations, Viscid, Music from a Darkened Room, Extremophilia, The Star Chamber, Observer Effect.
Okay. But what's the name of that book compilation?
This is the Night at the Opera.
Yeah,
the other one is Black Site. Yes.
Black Sites has Hourglass, and that's similar.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
They put it together in the same manner.
Right. Yeah. So, you mentioned Last Things Last. What else have you run?
Before the COVID scare, my group got through Reverberations and Viscid, and we had just started doing Music from a Darkened Room.
Yeah. Now, I've been part of VC's game. He ran me through Last Things Last with a couple others.
I did you a sore injustice running you through that, but yes, I did.
Have you changed things in how you run it?
I have, actually. There's a few things that I've altered based on feedback I've gotten from other groups and from what I've observed from other people running the game.
Yeah, that's cool. How have you... Now, has there been feedback that you've received that you've kind of said, hey, I'm not going to incorporate that because it's not the style or the approach I want to take?
Yeah, absolutely. I had one of my groups that I ran was an online group from hi puppy, from some of my other college friends, and one of them was, I guess, didn't fully understand what Delta Green was, and they were expecting like a nice, happy, bubbly ending. And I was like, nah, that's not what we get here.
Yeah.
They wanted. I ran them through Last Things Last, and they felt the depiction of Marlene was very much unflattering, and I should change it to make her more presentable. And I just don't think they fully grasped it.
Sure.
Oh, hey, look, there I am.
Yep. Trying to get this a little bit. There we go. Do you have Impossible Landscapes?
No, it's one of the books I might be getting today, actually.
Yeah, it's a beast. It's a good one, though.
It looked good. I mean, from what Dennis was saying on Twitter and what I've seen, it looks phenomenal.
That thing spans in-game at least 20 years. I think it starts in 1996. And then you go through the first chapter. And then the second chapter or storyline, it gets it's 2016. 20 years after. And then you're tapped for some stuff, and then it kind of snowballs into that. I haven't, and I know that because I haven't read it because I'm listening to the Lollygaggers. So shout out to them for doing a live play. Have you listened to them, VC, their actual play?
I have not. I actually just this week picked back up Mayday role playing because they started going through doing Delta Green again.
Yeah. Yeah, Lollygaggers are way deep into that scenario, and I'm telling you, the game master he's got his proverbial stuff together for sure. There's very little hesitation in what he's conveying and in reacting to the players' actions, and I'm like, I don't know how he does it because that campaign is not. In many Delta Green games, it's tough because you don't know which way the players are going to go. And going back to the Delta Green game that I ran to kind of bring it on back with Roger and Larry and the gang, first of all, it's an investigation game. Let me ask you, VC, what do you think is the biggest challenges in playing or running a Delta Green game?
From the GMing perspective, I think the biggest challenge I've seen for me is laying out everything so I know with the pre-published adventures what are the major beats and how they connect and how to hit them.
Yeah, and I think going back to what you were saying, and I think that's the deal. Might have been Roger. I apologize, Roger, if it wasn't you, but I think Roger might have mentioned doing something on investigative games and investigation specifically because of the Delta Green component. Even Call of Cthulhu and maybe some other ones. Gumshoe system is obviously a big one. And with Gumshoe, obviously the appeal of Gumshoe and any kind of implementation of it, Robin D. Laws, I can't remember the inspiration behind it, but I know with Ken Hite, who did Trail of Cthulhu, which is based on Gumshoe, and he did The Fall of Delta Green, based on Gumshoe, the elements of Call of Cthulhu, some would say, well, if you don't get the clue, you're kind of at a standstill. So let's do Gumshoe, where you always get the clue, then you spend a few more points and you can get more information, which is great. In order to not get into that rut, for me, when I run probably Call of Cthulhu or Delta Green, is I typically, if it's pretty obvious, they're going to get it. And Harrigan says it's not hard to apply the Gumshoe principles in all investigative games. Absolutely. And I think that's a good one. With Delta Green, VC probably, I'm sure knows, is if you have a specific rating and a skill, you don't have to make the person roll, right? Hey,
right.
Yeah, 50% in this. This is what you know. Fantastic. And I think with what I do is that's the deal. Unless there's something that's going to come out of the roll, then don't make them roll. Go ahead, VC.
Right. And I was about to say that when I've run the game, I've actually explained that to people, saying, if you want, I'll still let you roll the dice. I know all of us have that little goblin brain that says, yes, I want to make the little rocks do the clickety clack. But if you, like you've said, if you've got a certain level in biology, I'm going to treat you like you're a biologist. And this is simple. You understand how this works. I don't have to explain to you. You just know.
Yeah. Right. And that's a big one. And what Laramie says, Gumshoe isn't finding the clues, it's what you do with them, which is true. But having said that, there are certain editions of games where you don't make the roll, you don't get the clue. You don't get the clue, you can't move the story forward. How do you make that happen? And I think there's game masters that understand that and they get around it. And then there are game masters that don't. And it can be certainly frustrating if you have, that component bring your game to a screeching halt. So with Harrigan, what he's mentioning, you could easily do that in Delta Green. You have X a percent in a particular skill, you automatically know A. If it's above, Y percent, A and B. You could scale it, or you could add a base. So there's different things you could do. I think per the rules, it's really totally up to the GM. And it even says that. It's like, or the handler is what they're called in Delta Green. It says, hey, if you want the players to roll, great, but you don't have to. If they've got a certain percentage in a skill, you don't have to. But going with the investigative piece, there is such a what do we do? Where do we go? And even what Laramie says, it's not what you find as clues, it's what you do with them. So that's probably even a bigger component is, say you get a game master that throws all the clues at the player characters. Yeah, you get it. You don't even have to roll. Yep, here it is. You go to that site, you talk to somebody, they puke all this information on you. And it depends on how much information. It depends on whether the information's true. How do they know it's true? How do they know it's not true? Though a lot of those components really can, even giving all that information to a party can end up getting the game in a quagmire.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Harrigan says harder is when they miss a lead or just choose to not follow up on something. If they don't go to the right place And the module is written with them having to go to that place, he says. That's more legwork for the game master, which is probably the bigger issue, right? It's not even the clues, but it's that, especially if you're running published. And, I don't know how, I would say in the fantasy world, it's probably more likely that you're going to run into a dungeon master that's coming up with their own shtick. Delta Green, Call of Cthulhu, I don't know if that's necessarily true. VC, you ever create your own adventure scenario for Delta?
Yes. Actually, over this summer, after I got done running for you, I ran a few games for Gamers Table, and then we had talked about doing some actual plays on Gamers Table for Delta Green. So I started going through and making my own games. I think I got through 1.5 before life happened. And so I've got those still notebook down, and I'm going to work through fleshing them out, I think.
So what's the premise of one of them?
The premise of one of them is a Delta Green, an FBI agent who was actually a Delta Green informant, is found dead on a college campus up in the Dakotas. And the last thing they knew this guy was investigating was a small, what they were jokingly saying, a vampire night cult of students, which everything that I've put in there is made it to look like it's kids playing Vampire the Masquerade, but it's a whole hell of a lot more.
You've run that for other individuals?
No, this is the one where I've been hammering out the details and getting things laid out to see if they all connect together and it all makes sense. The one that I actually did start running for a few people over on the Gamers Table podcast, the premise for that one was that a green box in Idaho, in a small forest reserve in Idaho, needed to be relocated because the park was expanding and putting a new tower right where that box is. And in the process of going and getting the box, something happens.
In a green box, for those that don't play a lot of Delta Green, it's a storage location that might have sensitive information. It could, have guns and maybe things that an informant or previous Delta Green agent had acquired and they stashed somewhere. Could be. Go ahead, VC.
Absolutely, it's a box it's a devil's advocate box, basically. It's basically a stockpile of things that a former agent put in there thinking, hey, the next agents that come through might need something like this. Or it can also be, hey, we found this artifact. I don't want to turn it into Delta Green. I'm going to put it in this box and come back for it later.
Yeah. It can be used for lots of different things. And it's a term that isn't specific. Like, it's not literally a green box. It could be a storage place. It could be a Foot Locker. It could be, a closet in an apartment, whatever, etc. Right? It's just, that's what they refer to it as in Delta Green. It's the green box. Yeah. So I think getting the clues, great. You get them. What do you do with them? And then where do you go? And having it in this scenario where, like, they have to go to this place and they never do, how do you get them there? And then you start having to knock down some of the walls that are put up within the scenario in order to make that happen. And that's always tricky. With the group that I was running, there was something. Hold on a second. Dogs are up, I'm guessing. Is she all right? Okay, I'll be up in a second. My dog fell out of bed. She's like 9 pounds. Probably rolled.
Oh my God.
Yeah, she'll be fine. She'll be fine. She's tough. She is tough. She's taken a few bumps and bruises, and not to get into my dog story, but she's jumped steps and missed a step, and her face is like gone right into the step above, like kunk, right into her teeth. And she's just fine. Her. Anyways, I got to wrap it up because dogs, time, etc. Been on for a couple hours already anyway. But I'll just say this. With the group that I was running Delta Green for, they had a suspicion of what was the underlying evil and went about that path. Said, oh, that's the person we got to get rid of. We get rid of that. We should be taking care of what needs to be taken care of. And you go with it. It occurs, and then what happens is if it's the right person, then maybe these things happen. If it's the wrong person, then these things happen. Those things, whatever. So it's not, there isn't, I mean, yes, there is or can be a right answer necessarily, but at the same time, with Delta Green, the story that comes out of it can be just complete and utter chaos, right? There's part of the great thing about it is whatever path the players choose to pursue in the scenario, usually it's going to be catastrophic. It's going to be, having to be covered up. And that is also part of the deal within Delta Green. And some of those things can be either put forward into the next scenario or maybe 3 or 4 scenarios later, or it's just, fade to black and it pops up, as the adventurers go on with their lives thinking they got rid of the holy terror that was, kind of plaguing the scenario itself. So in that way, it's pretty nihilistic, right? You kind of go, well, shit, it doesn't even really matter what we do. And so players can have that feeling if it's not like wrapped up in a package with a bow on top. But, Delta Green, very rarely is that ever going to happen anyways, honestly. So with investigative games, I might do something on those, but, some of the, how would you tackle an episode? I mean, I think Brett and I probably did an episode on investigative games. I'd have to go and kind of re-listen to it. But, some of the big ones that you're going to have to highlight if I were to do that or cover it would be, how do people get the clues? Okay, these are a few methods. Okay, great. They have the clues. What do they do with them? When you're running like Massive Nyarlathotep and you've got a huge box, if you get the box set from the H.P. Lovecraft Society and they go to New York and they go to Jackson Elias's apartment, you dump all those clues right out on the table and go, here's what you find in his apartment. I mean, a matchbook, a letter, maybe it's a coaster with a particular bar on it. I don't remember all the clues, but there's a ton of them. Once they have them, what do they do with them? And that can be, especially with a huge, epic, long, big campaign like that, those are the problems that players are going to run into because you just don't know. So how does a game master help them? Is it luck rolls? Is it burning a resource? Is it a skill check that they make, and because they make or they have a certain ranking in that they automatically know this? And then the balance is you might have some players that just can't get to that. And it could be for any reason, like, hey, I'm just bogged down with something else. My mind isn't in the game to the point where I can come up with creative things to do with these clues. And then there's going to be maybe a player character or player at the table that's like, I got this. Okay, this is what we're going to do. It takes charge. You go check this out. You go check that out. Let's go to these places. Let's talk to this owner, talk to that person. And then it unravels and opens things up a little bit. Game masters also have to understand that just because you give them a clue and they follow it, whether it's true or not, then you have to keep giving them and rolling along with it, even if the next clue is like a brick wall. because then they're going to run into a problem. Roger says, I think, unfortunately, that would have been the strength of running the Delta Green experiment to see what each table does with the clues and info given to them as a comparison. And I wholeheartedly agree, Roger. What he's referencing, for those that aren't in the know, is that Brett and I were going to run Delta Green hourglass scenarios kind of parallel with each other, and then we could compare how the players decide different things based on the way Brett and I ran the game, or provided the clues, or gave him, the carrot and not the stick, or vice versa. So I agree. That's where the value would have came in, which is could be for any Delta Green game, like comparing how another game master rolls with it is certainly a bigger deal, and trying to get that. So having said that, is an investigative game always going to run smoothly? No. Is there ways that you can help to try to get it to run smoothly? Yes. And what are those details? And so maybe I'll come up with a few that'll help. And some of them I probably I could sit back and say, this is what you should do. And then Sean himself doesn't do it, right? Like, hey man, you never did that in our game. We kind of got stuck. How come you? But what I was going to say is that there's a balance between how much you want to feed the players, like just pour it all out on the table, and with them discovering it on their own to some degree, right? It's, if you don't organically put it out there, then it seems very much as a heavy-handed piece of, well, you guys are sitting around, random encounter, roll for initiative to get them to move. It's the same as if you are, hey, like Brett would say, clue by fours fall out of the sky onto your heads. Here you go. And it's like, what? How would we even know this? We do? This doesn't even make sense. Or, yeah, you were at the library. They didn't find the clue. They're out on the road. Oh, by the way, you remember at the library. And it's like, oh, Sean is obviously trying to bring that thing back into the story so we have something to chew on and go in a particular direction. Why didn't he bring it up in the library? Oh, I forgot. Oh, okay. But they never go back. So how am I going to get them that info? Like, it's just some details. I got to start rolling up. But having said that, I want to read up. Roger mentions, I've also now read through the adventure, and I think the part I was missing was when you see the whole picture, certain things stand out as clues, but in and of themselves, I didn't make the connection. And Roger, that's a good point. So when you read it, you're like, oh, I could see kind of how everything moves together. But when, you're in the trenches, sometimes you can't see the forest through the trees. Harrigan says, I know a very skilled GM who just hates running investigation games. He was a player in my VSN game and took a big liking to that system. Ran it for his own group in general, has a great framework for episodic mysteries. Easy to port as well, too. Roger said, also, I forgot to ask if the room service piece was another meth head attack. Roger, I implemented that on my own. So there's a point where meth addicts come and rough up the player characters, and he's talking about the attack in the hotel room, and I did it out on the road. So I did a little improvisation. But anyways, I gotta go. I gotta wrap this up. I got dogs that need to go out. One fell on her head coming out of bed, so there you go. But I appreciate everybody that showed up today. We've had quite a crowd coming and going, so thank you so much for everybody doing that. CJ and Ghost GM and Spook and 408 and VC and Discord. I'm gonna keep doing the Discord thing and see how it works. I gotta make sure there's no surprises. Nothing against VC, but I thought, hey, you got something to say? Raise your hand. I'll bring you in. The push to talk helps the feedback thing, so I think I got to keep that in place. Because I can hear the ding and then I could shut up, because if I talk when VC's talking, then it's going to come back and do feedback. But I thought it was all right. Thanks, VC, for taking the guts to step up.
Yeah, not a problem. Also, when I'm talking like this, it mutes you, so I don't think it would cause a feedback.
Oh, interesting. Did not know that. I got to remember that when you're talking. What do you mean I'm muted? I don't want to interject. Hear me. But anyways, keep on gaming. Thanks for tuning in. Monday night, Gaming NBS is not live recording. Brett is off in the North Woods doing something, so there won't be a show. I don't know. Maybe I'll get on the Discord and just kind of hang out. we'll see. If you go to gamingandbs.com/Discord, that's where I hang out with everybody that's typically here on Saturdays. Otherwise, I think that's about it. I think I'm going to look Time to Kill. I'm looking probably to do a live play of that. It's a solo role-playing game that uses a deck of cards. I actually have it sitting here, and I was going to potentially do that. Remember, be a positive force in the tabletop RPG hobby. Have a good one. Keep on gaming. We'll talk to you later.
Peace.